Good morning, I'm Norma Cowie and welcome once more to my YouTube channel and the Wednesday Norma Talks. Every week I consider, what am I going to talk about on Wednesday? And it's always in the back of my mind. Now, an interesting thing happened. Over the course of this week, as I was contemplating certain topics to go into, I had 2-3 times people come up and talk to me about money, wealth, and those kind of things. Now, back in 2002, I wrote a little booklet called The Spiritual Principles of Wealth. And that came out of largely a course that I took with a lady by the name of Edwene Gaine in Alabama. Yes, I traveled to Alabama for this. It was a master's prosperity program. Now, I had met Edwene, and at that time, her current husband in that time, a little bit before 2002, at a Unity church in Vancouver. And I really liked how she put things. It was very practical, it made a lot of sense. And so I decided I would go to Alabama to take this course. Now, before I begin that, I wanted to read out some of the how in my little booklet that I ended up writing, which not only had the spiritual side, but also the practical side. Because when I began teaching this, which I did for many years, is that I found that people had some concepts and they got them down, but they didn't have the practicality. Now, I was fortunate in having a father that was very practical about monies, and consequently that had influenced me, plus my life. So in the beginning of my book, and I'm going to read, I don't like reading out usually, I tend to just talk, but as I looked at this morning, just kind of deciding which way I was going to go, and I thought this applies a lot in general in life, and we forget often to be able to acknowledge. And because I have written these books, I should say, I wrote them back further, that has given me an opportunity. And so in this one, I said, no one grows and learns without the aid of the people around them. They may be teachers, friends, spouses, children, siblings, or parents. Whatever role they play, they will add to us. I give thanks to the following: my parents, who created the original stamp for looking at the world; my ex-husband, with whom I struggled in the early years to create financial security, and with whom I first began to recognize the pattern of have not. William, who is now another ex-husband, who brought a whole new aspect of abundance awareness to my life. My teachers in prosperity thinking have been invaluable. Edwene Gaine, who teaches me all the time, even when I'm not in her presence. I say thank you for teaching me the long-looked-for spiritual principles. Catherine Ponder, whose books I have read. Her insights into the spiritual laws of abundance, prosperity have aided me. John Randolph Price and his abundance book have contributed greatly to my coming to understand how to reach and maintain the abundance level. I cannot say enough about John Randolph Price. I've met him. I've read his other books, but the small green abundance book, as far as I'm concerned, needs to be in everyone's library. Both Alan Jacks and Mark Victor Hansen, through their workshops and tapes, aided me, and as always, my students. Those who come to learn with me, thank you one and all. May everyone experience abundance in all levels of your world. Lastly, my children, who consistently support me, their crazy mother, and her many schemes and plans of wealth. Yes, I went through quite a few things. That was in August 2002. And a couple of definitions of wealth. Well-being or welfare, a collection of term for riches, material possessions in all their variety, affluence, opulence, profusion, and abundance. And then the definition of wealthy: having wealth, having large possessions and lands, affluent, rich, opulent, large in point of value. So my abundance, that introduces, that's not even the introduction, because I went through my childhood a lot in my childhood. But I wanted to talk to you a little about what I learned from the Master's Prosperity course in Alabama with Edwene Gaine and her then husband, Bert Carson. They taught 4 principles: forgiveness, goal setting, tithing, which is giving, and divine purpose. Probably forgiveness is the first one they talk about. And for me, it has set me on a road of a lot of different things. And one of the, right in the beginning, I put forgiveness on this statement of fact. When you are not in a state of forgiveness, you will have blocks. The unforgiven resentments, guilt, and the unreleased emotions create far more restriction in your life than you are aware. These blocks will be stopping your natural flow of wealth. Now, for many of you know, I do a lot of energy transformation, clearing blocks. And I think really when I look back, that was the beginning of me to begin to understand more about how we emotionally block. Now, I'd already knew a lot about guilt and regret through the past life regression work I was doing. But this added a different component to it and made it more perhaps wider and more relevant to our present day. Now, I'm going to do an exercise that I do here called the Forgiveness River. And if you want to, you can close your eyes or just re-listen to this, rewind it and re-listen. And this is how the Forgiveness River exercise goes. Imagine a river. Notice how it looks. Is it smooth and straight? Is it quiet and deep? Or does it have a waterfall? Note all the details and then look to see how many rocks you have in the river. The rocks depict the people or situations you need to forgive. You may have a few or a lot of rocks. Pick a rock and ask it what it represents, and listen carefully to the answer. By asking the rocks, one by one, what they represent, you can discover who and what you need to forgive. In this exercise, it's amazing what people have discovered. Some people have one huge big rock in the middle of the river. Some people have lots of little ones at the bottom. Their river runs smooth and nice, and they look down and there's all these little rocks. And there is no right way, because it's your river, it's your life, it's your ability to be able to forgive and to be able to know that you are forgiven in the big scheme of things, and to forgive those things where we've held judgment, where we've held resentment, where we've had, or been guilty over, oh, I did that, or I really, sometimes we have a right-wrong program inside, depending on how we were raised. And that really makes a big difference. So there's lots of stories I have about that, but forgiveness to me is something that I still to this day practice, sometimes on a daily basis, sometimes not, because it may not need to be at that point of time. But it's really important to ensure that you are at peace with yourself over what you have done. And forgiveness to me is aligning with the universal love force, bringing it inside me, and then stating, I forgive myself for whatever. It's not about the other person. I know a lot of workshops, it's all about them out there. It's not true. If you forgive yourself and your part in anything that's going on, it's very easy to forgive the other person. But if you just go and forgive the other person, you were part of whatever it was. You were there, even when you was very little. Your soul isn't very little. Your soul is ancient. And who knows what has happened to bring all that together. And so it's very important to have that. So the forgiveness part is very, I think, an important element to anybody in any aspect of life. But when you realize that those emotional blocks can stop that river of wealth or money or feeling of whatever it is you require, then you know that what you need to do. Now, the second title that we looked at on that weekend was goal setting. And I'm just going to read a little bit again. How many times have you heard goals are important? Well, they are. Once I am going to read this, but I wasn't going to, but I am. Once I did a consultation in which I could see that the person before me had no direction, no goals at all. And I said to her, what are your goals and where do you want to go? And she replied in all sincerity, God knows. I replied, how? And she could not answer. I believe we do create our reality by our thoughts. And we send, by sending out the thoughts, especially with energy, then what we call God or whatever name you call to that supreme being. And God is a loving energy. And it's just like an indulgent father or mother. This energy of love will bring you anything you want. There is no discrimination and no judgment. In goal setting, what you're doing is you're telling this energy, which I've written down here as God, this is what I want. This is what I want brought to me. Now, I have taught a lot about goal setting and steps and how I teach the first step principle, where that is know your end result and ask yourself, what is the first step? Because people get hooked up and they procrastinate because of all of the differences between all the bits and pieces. But another example I use, and I've had a lot of laughter in workshops on this one. I ask yourself, it says, an example I use when teaching goal setting is ask yourself, would you go into a restaurant and say, bring me whatever? Usually we order very specifically what we want. Therefore, when we are putting our order into the kitchen of life, we need to be specific or be satisfied with what is dealt up. Now, I have twice been in a group of people where people are engaged in a conversation. The waitress has walked up and the person has turned and said, bring me whatever. And literally, eventually, usually it was breakfast because I used to travel a lot. And they would bring whatever and the person would eat it quite gladly, carrying on their conversation or whatever. Most of us don't do that. We order very, very specifically. So if you're not placing your order, if you're not clear of how you want things, then you need to be satisfied with what shows up, because that is really how goal setting works. There's a formula, and very often I know in other talks I've talked specifically about that. Now I want to come to the reason why I went to this particular course down in Alabama, and it was about tithing. I couldn't get it. Now I'd been in the spiritual side of things for a lot of years. I'd gone to a metaphysical church in Vancouver, BC. I had gone through their program. I hadn't become a minister there yet, but I had also been a practitioner, which is knowing how to do prayers, and I still do those. But tithing, I couldn't get my head around it. So anyway, I signed up for the course that I'm going to do, and they sent us a book. And in that book, which went over these basic principles, of which there were 4, and we've gone through 2 of them now, it talks about, and it says in there, you're going to give a 7-minute presentation on this topic. Well, just guess what topic I had: tithing. So I had to really sit down and do some thinking. And one of the things I came up with that made a huge difference to me was this. And again, it's easy for me to read than just remember what I said. The major lesson I learned is tithing is acknowledging God on the physical plane. We speak to God through prayer, meditation, and visualization, which is mental and emotional. To acknowledge God, excuse me, in the physical is through tithing-giving. When you tithe to your spiritual source, You are acknowledging God in action. You acknowledge God is your source. When you tithe, you say, I see you, God. Here I acknowledge you are present. Now that can be tremendous things. I remember driving along here one time and I saw this tree, and this tree was in the middle of an industrial area, and it was just there beaming life as trees can do. And I remember thinking, how do I tie to the tree? And then I thought, well, there are groups that support trees and families and things like, family of trees, things like that, tree areas. And I found that by tithing to your spiritual source, you had to be on the lookout. I had to figure out where you are being spiritually fed. Sometimes it's a person. And what I found, much to my chagrin one time when I was tithing to a person that had really, really helped me a lot, they wouldn't take it. I was tongue-tied because I couldn't say, you're actually stopping my good coming because I'm acknowledging God in action here. And I found that it put me in touch also with my feeling of gratitude. I feel joy when I move into gratitude. I'm grateful. There's so many things I'm grateful for. And there's sometimes I'm like everybody else. I forget to acknowledge God in action. I forget to be grateful. I forget to all those things. But I know that God is my source. And I give thanks for that. I give thanks consistently. I went for a drive yesterday a little bit out of my town and high up in the hills, and some of the views of the lake and the trees, it was magnificent. And it reminds us how beautiful a world we live in, and how if you're close to the country, you can read out, cities. If you've got water, it helps. But it's like this, like Vancouver is beautiful with the mountains and the sea and everything. But I live in a small town that has 2 lakes, and we live in between the 2 lakes. And so around hills, and they're not really mountains, but hills. And there's some beautiful, beautiful scenery because of that goes through. So I usually began when I get really aware of where I'm going. But tithing and giving, I did learn about it. I did understand what it is. And I really appreciate knowing that. And it was well worth the trip, not only for all the knowledge I got there, but mainly to understand that how we give from our hearts. A lot of people, and again, I just feel I need to say this. Some people say to me, well, I don't have any money to give. And well, you have, if you need anything, you give it, you tithe it. If you want time, you tithe your time. If you want goods, you tithe goods. Whatever it is, you will get what it is that comes back, because it's reciprocity. Is that the word? I have trouble with that word, saying that word. Okay, divine purpose was the final one. What is your reason for being here, basically? Often readers or other people, astrologers, will say, oh, your purpose for being here is this. But you got to feel that in your heart. You've got to feel that divine essence. I always think we're supposed to be having fun. And often right now, life isn't always as much fun as we would like. If it's not fun to you, if it hasn't bring enjoyment, and that's a word I don't have written in here, but really it means that, to do something that is enjoying. Now, for myself, when I was looking at my divine purpose, it came down to this. I love to teach. One reason I'm doing these is because I love to teach. And plus, I had an inner message that it was time for me to put out my thoughts, because they're very different than often many other people's thinking. And this is my divine purpose. All my consultations are teaching experiences. All of it, I'm always explaining how things work, how things come together. I'm a potpourri of information from many different people, and a lot of it, if it didn't work practically for me, then I let it go. It had to work practically. It had to have a practical application into my life. And we really need to look at, what do we love to do? People love to sing. And that could be, I've just been watching American Idol, and they have some great singers this year, just beautiful. And So powerful, so talented, and young, very young. Not all of them, but most of them. And they're really working to have and create a career. But the reality is, we cannot always work what we love to do. And I run into this a lot with my clients. And I say, give gratitude that you're making the money so you can do what you want to do. I like to travel. I like to go places. I've been fortunate to have traveled in many places. It takes money to do that. So I'm very grateful to be able to travel. And maybe one day again, I will be able to go out of the country. But it's like how we do what we love, it enhances us. It brings us more into an understanding of who we are. I was fortunate. I was able to travel a lot, teaching what I knew. Tarot, past life regressions in particular. I've taught past life regressions all over the world. Not many people did that. I have a very interesting technique on that. That's a subject for another day. But it's like I have lots of little exercises for things and how you want to create. But mostly when it comes to prosperity, what I did was create what I call the abundant creation triangle. And it has 3 parts to it. But before we go to the 3 parts, it says, I write here, you need to know you deserve it. So whatever you're asking for, you deserve it. To allow it and to receive it joyously, even if it's not exactly what you want, but especially when it is. Now, there's an element I've got here, allowing, deserving, receiving joyously. And I didn't bring up the sheet that shows this, but if you've got a piece of paper, draw a line straight down, doesn't have to be long, and then right across the bottom. So you can join the 2 ends of the flat line up to the top one of the allowing. So you're making a triangle with a line in the middle. On the left side, you write deserving, and the right side receiving joyously. I always like the joyously because it's just, I had a great lesson one time about giving somebody something and there was no joy in the receiving of it all. They didn't know how. They didn't know how to receive. They didn't know how to receive, period. Never mind joyously. And I'm glad I raised children that knew how to receive joyously. Because I traveled, they used to put their orders in before I went somewhere as what they wanted me to bring back. And they were delightful with whatever I did bring back. And on the very top, put allowing. Now, basically, these are 100%. The ends where you made your triangle is 100%. And then what you do is you look at deserving and you ask yourself, how much do I deserve? And you make a mark approximately on that line there between the middle line. So it may be 50%, it may be 60%, it may be more. If it's 100, I usually question that when I'm doing workshops on this. Then you go to that main line in the middle. What percentage do I allow? If you have control issues, your percentage will be low. 20% maybe you allow because you want to be in control of it. There's a fear factor that's going on. And so anyway, you put it whatever percentage it is or whatever number. We even want if you use 1 to 10, if you're don't like using 100%. And then on the right-hand side is receiving joyously. So in other words, you're happy to receive what comes in and you make a mark. Now, very seldom are they the same percentage. And then what you do is you take your pen and you make your triangle inside that other triangle of what it is. And you can tell what you do not have in balance. Maybe you don't know that you deserve it. Maybe because you don't allow it to show up the way it shows up because you think it has to show up this way or that way rather than, oh, look, there it is. And maybe you don't receive. But you see, once you have that sorted out, then there is a really, really easy way of is it easy? Well, it's the work I do, is to be able to make that wider so that you can receive what it is you want. Yeah, and so with these 4 principles, being able to work with them, it really, really makes quite a bit of a difference. Now I've got one more exercise I want you to do, imaginational exercise. And that is just about allowing, because this is how I feel that really is necessary. So if you want to close your eyes again and just listen, that's great. Imagine a river, not the forgiveness river. This is another river. As you imagine this river, imagine you are a rock in the river. Notice how big you are. Notice that you are allowing the river to bring to you. Notice what's coming down the river. Note how it feels to be there in the river, allowing the river to bring to you what you want. And the exercise that I hand out, it says, it feels blank to allow the river to bring me what I want. This exercise is one that I have found really important. Sometimes people fill up the whole river as the rock. Sometimes they're very porous, so the water moves all through them. Sometimes they're a small rock and the river goes by. Sometimes the river's too fast, it's not comfortable. Sometimes it's just way too slow and they're just like, oh, it's boring. So the key here is to remember that everything adds. It adds to your knowledge. It adds to your awareness. It adds to your, I think I said nads, that's not very good. It adds to your whole sense. And then I have another little exercise here called a connection exercise. Close your eyes and look around with your inner eye or your imagination for a light. It can be close or far away, and it can be of any color. It can be inside you or outside of you. When you find it, bring it closer with your breath, allowing it to come all around you, and you will begin to feel it. What you may feel is a warmth that contains love, peace, acceptance. If these feelings are not there, then look around for another light and bring that in and let it integrate with the previous light you found. Some people will need to bring in and integrate several lights before the feeling of love, peace, and acceptance is present. When the feeling of love, peace, and acceptance is present, fill yourself up. You deserve to have this feeling. It is yours. It is you. Allow it to fill you. You may discover you have blocks in your body that will not accept this light. This is where you are holding onto emotions, pain, hurt, guilt, or fear. By taking your mind into the blocks, you can discover what you're about before you let them go into the light. You can release your blocks into the light. Slowly bring the light inside and release the blocked energy into the light. As the light takes the blocked energy into itself, it will transform the blocked energy into loving energy. And slowly the block is released and the new loving energy will replace it, just like a flashlight absorbs the dark. As each block is released, you become more of your source light, more connected, more of who you truly are. Becoming who we truly are is very important, I feel. If you're all wanting to be connected, if you're all wanting to create what you want to create. Now, I want to just finish this with a thought about money. A lot of people see me and a lot of people have problems with money. And what I say to them is this: money is an energy of exchange. And I think of it as a ribbon of love moving around the world. You have come here, you will give me some money for what I do. I will then take that money and I will pay a bill or whatever I'm going to do with that, purchase something, create something. And that love gets transformed and it goes around the world. Money is only a means of exchange. I once was married to a man who didn't like the word money. He thought he came from a very, very wealthy family, and when he was a child, anyway, he didn't like money. He didn't want money. And like, why do we have to have this word called money? Because it would be called something else, and we would have the same reactions to it. But when we think of it, that money is the exchange, and I didn't do the numerological because I didn't know I was going to do this. I didn't add it up. But if you add up the name of the money, I will do that after because that would be interesting. And I've not think I've ever done that. And if I did, I've forgotten. And so it's like if you can think of the means of exchange, this goes to gratitude, this goes to giving with love. If you are willingly giving your money to whatever it is that you need to do, that makes space for more to come in. Miracles happen. They've happened to me. They've happened to friends. They happen around us by opening up, by allowing space to create. It's not about the money. It's about the quality of life. It's about you discovering who you truly are. And this connecting to the light exercise at the end of every transformation I do, I call it the color exercise. We do basically this exercise to find out if there's what I call program reinstillers, because we're crafty as people. And so we create these little programs that if we change this, we have another one that comes in and wants to put it back to how it originally was. And this is why often when we do a lot of work and we haven't, and then somehow we slip back to how we were, it's because we didn't get the program reinstiller. I call them program reinstillers. I trust, and I really, really trust that some of the information that I've said here today works. If you would like to follow up with that, if you would like a copy of this book, I'm quite willing to send you a PDF copy of it. It's a little booklet that I wrote in 2002. You're very welcome to that. Just contact me through my website, normacowie.com. I really thank you for listening and supporting me with your likes, with subscriptions, with the comments in particular as well. I just want you to have a great week. I will be back on Sunday with my Sunday thought. Other than that, be prosperous. Blessings.